you want to learn more about effective management, head over to madsingers.com and sign up for my free management training.
Welcome to the Mad Singers Management Podcast from madsingers.com, where entrepreneurs and business managers learn and share. If you like the show, don't forget to leave a review.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Ghilaine Chan from the amazing named company, Brilliant and Human. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me.
Fantastic. Ghilaine, there's still people in the world who doesn't know who you are. Would you mind doing a quick introduction?
My name's Ghilaine Chan, and I work with Brilliant and Human, and we work on the businesses, small businesses, and we look at how their customers and their people and their technology work together. So we very much look at the whole interface with those three elements, and I am responsible for the inside of the businesses and how people work better together within those teams. My career is been predominantly in technology. I've got quite a potted history and quite a varied approach to my career. I go from fashion to retail, accountancy software, and then I did quite a large part of my career with a big company that you may know and love or not, and I left there about 6 years ago to work with small businesses and apply some of the growth approach to those businesses that I did in my corporate career. I worked with consultancy businesses who have field engineers and a lot of people who work remotely. So I've got about 16 years of building and managing remote and virtual teams, and my specialty is customer service.
Excellent. That sounds good. How do you generally think management? Like if you have to walk into a new team, or if you're walking into talk to a client, like what's sort of your mindset or what's sort of your philosophy around management?
So my main philosophy is everyone should be allowed to bring themselves and be themselves. And I think the biggest struggle we have predominantly is people trying to be someone they're not, and also to some degree not bringing their personal lives to their work. And I know in my history, I used to compartmentalize my life, and so my work life was at work and my personal life was at home. And I realized that as soon as you open up to people, they open up to you. So when you're managing people, you are their carer. You have to care about them, and you have to give them the best tools to work well. And some people can get on and kind of, yep, fine, I don't need the chat. But I had a couple of people in my team very early on who really needed that social element, that hi, how are you, and really needed to understand me as a person before they would then open up as a person, and I could get the best from them. And that was a bit of a baptism of fire. I had some struggles with actually sharing a lot of personal things with this person. But as soon as we opened up that personal relationship, it was just amazing. The difference was amazing. And so I realized that I can't be one-sided. I can't put one facet in front of people and expect them to deal with me in a way that is personal and vulnerable, which when you're managing people, sometimes you have to deal with the good and the bad. And so you want them to be honest with you. You want them to be as open as they can be with you. And that comes from you having to do that to them. And so that was one of the things, was bring your whole self. And then the second one is you can't manage in a style that doesn't work for you. So, I think we've all been through some kind of training, and they kind of feed this not quite one size fits all, but these frameworks, these approaches, and you try and do it, and you just, it's just not natural. And people very much, if you're not being yourself, people can identify something that you just feels a bit off. And I realized that actually there are ways you can completely bring yourself, be open and honest, and your team can't expect something that you can't give. So sometimes it's a case of, this is how I am, this is how you are, right? we've got a gap here. How do we fill that gap? And it may not be with you, it may be with someone else. And so it's identifying what you can do for your people, but then also making sure that you have support in the other areas that perhaps aren't you. And I think that's the thing, is you're there to remove challenges, not build a wall. And so I think by being vulnerable and being open, you get a lot better out of people than trying to be something that you're not.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, my philosophy is very similar, and I think most people that ever work with me definitely, like, this thing with building relationship with people is probably the single most important thing. Like, actually, it's not just sharing, but obviously different people are different. As you say, some people you have to share for them to share. But I also really agree in terms of, like, you know, people are different. And what I always tell people, one of the common things that a lot of my clients is telling me is like, oh, you know, I can't be friends with my staff if I'm their boss. And I always ask them the same thing, which is like, are you comfortable with being friends with them or not? Because I can totally see what they mean, but it depends actually more on your personality than on anything else. Because if you're comfortable being someone's quote friend, and at the same time actually pushing them the right way, giving them the feedback needed, making sure they perform, then it is not an issue. Now, if you being a friend with them means that you can't do that effectively, yes, then it makes sense. But there's a big difference between building a relationship and, you know, sharing a bit of who you are, and then being friends with someone. I mean, hanging out at a barbecue and, you know, on Sunday night with someone, that's very different than actually sharing who you are as a person and so on in the actual workplace, right? So I think, yeah, I totally agree with your approach, and I really love the way you look at it. And particularly the last thing you say, I mean, I think so many people are trying to be something they're not, right? Like, when you look at it overall, people look up to these people like, I mean, Elon Musk and all these big famous people that, you know, if you're like them, their style will work somewhat for you. But the whole point is most people are not. And if you're trying to mimic someone, even if you have a great boss that you really adore, if that person have a very different behavior from you, if you're trying to mimic what they're doing, you won't succeed, right? As a leader and as a manager, the most important thing is always figure out how can you utilize your strength? How can you take the best of you and utilize that to get the most out of your team, right? And really getting to know yourself, and particularly your strengths and weaknesses, is really probably the number one key for becoming a great manager, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right. So, and yeah, I mean, everyone have their own approach, right? Everyone sort of do things differently. What's sort of your, let's call it, management system, if we will? I haven't talked with people about that for a while. So again, if you manage a team, if you have to move into a new team, like, what's a typical sort of routine, or what's a typical system that you will use from a management standpoint?
So this is something I did, again, kind of going back to trying to understand, when you go entry level people management, you're kind of dumped into it, really. And I think everyone's a bad people manager. You just improve with practice. A lot of these things can't necessarily be learned, and you definitely improve from making mistakes. And going back to a couple of members of my team, I've been working virtually for a very long time, and I was able to have IM and some of these remote tools quite early on, working in a large technology company. And I am very much come, ask a question, go away. It's like, I don't need all the other stuff. And I've got quite a quick typing style. And I'd have this one in my team, and they'd be like, hi. And they type it really slowly. And then they'd wait for an answer and have to go, hi. And they'd be like, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? And it'd just be this kind of like, just ask me the question. And I'd have these little frustrations around, and because you don't see them, those frustrations can become very big very quickly. And what I did was I realized, okay, everyone has their own communication style. And so and because we were all around the world and in different situations, different people had different approaches. They were in different places, they had different challenges. And what we did was, I thought, actually, people are moaning about each other because they can't see each other. So let's had the opportunity to get everyone in a room. And what I wanted everyone to do is, if you want to get the best from me, how do you do it? So how best to communicate with me, and what are my challenges? So what is my setup where I am? So what does my desk look like? What situation am I dealing with? And where I was in my office, I had a couple of a team there, and we had many buildings, so we were very far away from the people that we interacted with on a daily basis, and they'd never come and sit at our desk. But one of my team was sat in the same room as all the people that we dealt with, and they would come and sit on her desk and kind of lean over her and ask her. And all of these things I knew, but my team didn't necessarily know. So what we did was everyone had a slide. This is me. This is how I work. This is how to get the best from me. And it was absolutely amazing. It was the most profound thing I've ever done, watching everyone go around the room, display their slides, and then that, like, oh, right. Oh, I see. That's why when this happens, that kind of look of on your face, or when that happens, I get a really quick and sharp response. And so I did that with every team member. So as we grew, every team member had their own kind of slide deck. And it wasn't until I left that I realized how important it was to build rapport very quickly. And you've probably seen it on the web. There's lots of different things. And so I have a user manual. They're called README files, blueprints. There's quite a few leaders across the world now that use it, and you can go and if you type in user manual, you'll get lots of hints and tips. I absolutely love it. And what I do is I write a bit about me and how I am. I'm quite Marmite. I'm very direct, can be kind of honest to the point of tactlessness. Sarcasm and humor is a constant in my language, so I can offend people very quickly. So that's right at the top of my user manual. But it looks at how best to communicate with me, what my values are, what frustrates me. And I use this with teams I go into. I use it as a way of, I've done it with dysfunctional teams, and I've done it with teams that are being built, and really understanding who you're going to see. And the thing that I've noticed is, even if you don't have an active approach to building a team in any form, there is a theme that runs through most teams that have been working together a little while. And that's what you pull on. You say, look, these little things here, this is that red thread that connects you all together. This is the shared value. This is the shared approach. And this is the thing that holds you together and keeps you working together. And there's a lot of differences, but even when people I meet for the first time have read it, they're like, oh yeah, that really resonated with me. And you get this chance to find that bizarre similarity that you both have that isn't, oh, do you like cats? You know, it's a real conversation starter, but it basically takes away all of that stuff that we find is really hard to ask each other. It's like, how can I get the best from you? How do you like to work? How do you like to be called? When do you do your best work? All of these things, we don't ask each other these things. We kind of feel like we should learn it through osmosis, and then wonder why we're slightly irritated by people when we haven't learned it. And this gives it all out. No, it's not personal. If someone's rude to you because you've done something, it's not personal. It's because they're reacting at their immediate point without thinking. And it just takes all that personal, oh, have I done something to upset you? No, you did this, and this is how I react. And I find it, going back to your point of the best part of leadership is self-awareness and being yourself. It gives you that opener to say, this is me, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, this is how I communicate, these are my values. Whatever approach you want in that user manual, it gives you the chance to say, this is who I am, and this is who you are. And the key thing, I think, with people management is, actually, your people shouldn't, they shouldn't necessarily want to get the best from you. That's not their job. They probably will, because most humans go, I want to do something that's not going to piss someone else off. But what it does allow you is, as a people manager, you go to where that person is. So if that person needs the hi, how are you, how's your family, to warm them up, that's what you do as a people manager. It's your responsibility to meet your people where they are. And by doing that approach allows you to treat them so that they're comfortable and they open up to you and they provide you with whatever you need to help them do their job. And that's the key. It's a tool that helps you manage the people where they are, and not necessarily to beat them with a stick and say, treat me this way, you must treat me this way, otherwise I'll be mean. And I think that's the thing, is, and it's it can be as full or as empty as you like it. It can be really kind of high level, not very personal, or you can go really deep and personal with it. And I love it as an approach. I've seen it work so well in so many companies, and people, it's relatively straightforward to do. You know what annoys you, you know what frustrates you, you know how you work best. That's all you need to do. And yeah, it's the best tool I've used, and I use it for recruitment. I use it for building teams. I use it for bringing teams together. I use it personally, just so when people meet me, they know a little bit about me, and it just cuts out that massive, possibly 6 months worth of trying to get to know people. It takes you to the next level very quickly.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I'm a huge fan of a framework called DISC. Not sure if you're familiar with it, but that is exactly what I get out of DISC, right? So one of the things that I've found is sometimes people don't know themselves very well. So for example, some people don't actually know up front, do they prefer writing or do they prefer talking, or like what's the preferred communication style? And so some people don't know, but I've used DISC framework a lot to help people understand that, specifically about themselves, and like basically getting to know themselves better. But I really like this idea. I've actually never heard anyone sort of take this to the nth degree, and I really like it, particularly with remote teams. I mean, when you're in an office, there's definitely it's less secretive who you are and so on, because you do bring yourself. But particularly with remote teams, particularly if they're sitting in different parts of the world and stuff, I can totally see how this would be super valuable. So I think that's something that's definitely super valuable for the audience to try out. So yeah, that sounds awesome.
Thank you. I'd say that one of the things to answer that question of people not knowing themselves, the question I always ask is, what makes you angry and what frustrates you, and what's the worst thing that can happen if you're middle of something really important that you're working on? What's the worst thing that can happen that someone can kind of contact you? How would they contact you? And those things really generate, actually, I prefer phone calls or I prefer writing. But what makes you angry is a really good thing. To the flip side of that is what's going to get the best out of you, because it really feeds on that fundamental, visceral part of you. So that's the question I start with, actually, when building these with people.
It reminds me actually about a manager I had at one point, and he said, I have an open door policy, but I don't like talking, so send me an email. That was basically, and on his door, he literally had a big sign saying, please send me an email. So that was his way of kind of communicating to people how he liked to be communicated to. I'm not sure it was particularly effective with his staff, but he was definitely making it clear.
Yes.
So. Right, that's really cool. I love that tip. I think that's really good. When you're in a team, very frequently, particularly in these remote teams, it can be a little bit difficult, sort of figuring out how to get the most out of your staff. Any particular inspiration or good techniques or so on that you use personally to try and really get the most from a performance standpoint out of people?
So I think a couple of things is really knowing their challenges. And I would say that you should be having regular check-ins with your team on a weekly basis, certainly when you're remote, because you don't have those hi, how are you at the coffee machine moments. So you have to be really intentional with those touch points. And it can feel really fake and really pointless, because you think, oh, if they have a problem, they'll call me. They won't. If they have a problem, they don't necessarily, they're like, oh, it's a bad time, I'm not sure, or it will move. So ultimately, depending on your responsibilities as a people manager and depending on how big your team is, you should definitely be having 15 minutes with every member of your team in a week. If you can do it daily, brilliant. And that's less realistic. But the check-in should not be about you going, so what have you got on your list? It should be like, what's happening, what are your challenges, how are you doing? And I think definitely with remote teams, it's really understanding the setup. So get the camera on, see where they are, ask them who they sit next to. You know, if it's remote working in the shared office, who do they sit next to? What are their challenges? If you can visit them, obviously in this current situation, that's a bit more tricky, but really understanding who have they got in their office, who's in their home, what responsibilities they have. So get to know them on a kind of logistical level of the life they have and what their responsibilities are. And then make sure that you ask them about certain things like that. Has anything changed? You know, take photos of your office or anything like that. But the check-ins are really, what's happening with you? How's it going? Is there anything I can help with? Is there any issues I can take away? And having a clear kind of set of questions that just guides them to give you their challenges. And it's not about you going, right, I want you to do this, this, and this, and then off the phone. It's like, okay, what's going on in your world? What's sitting on your plate? Who's doing what with you? How are you helping other people? What's going on? And I also encourage like a daily, I would say take it from the agile approach, a daily stand up with your team. And it doesn't have to be long, but it has to be, everyone comes together. They don't have to come together, but they hopefully will want to. It's not work related, but it really is a case of, hi, how are you doing? What's going on in your world? Is there any challenges the team can help with? What's, you know, kind of just a little coffee. Depending on how big your team is, that might go for an hour. Everyone grabs a coffee, comes in, says hi, talks about personal stuff. No work, talks about personal things. Work tends to pepper in because that's their common theme, but there's not an agenda of this is work. There's an agenda of going around the call, seeing how everyone is, seeing what's changed. I like to start every call with good news. So is there some good news? Because sometimes, certainly in the current climate, it can be quite hard. And so just pick up just give a positive. But there's other approaches, which is kind of like a temperature check. How do you feel? You know, a one word, what's going on in your world, one word coming into the call, one word going out of the call. And you can often notice that they come in kind of, I'm tired, they go out energized or, you know, happy. And so you see that just how that connection goes from, oh, I've got to be on a call with all my colleagues to, I've made a connection, we've chatted, I feel so much more energetic, I feel a bit more focused on what I've got to do. The other things with remote work is people actually need to go and do the work that they're doing. And so really give people a very set amount of time where they can go and do the work that you're asking them to do. And so I have an approach where I look at everyone's energy through the week and see if you can pick up times where some people focus, say, like for me, my focus time is Monday morning, first thing, I get loads done. So don't schedule meetings then, but do put them in, dotted around the week that works for everyone. So bring everyone together and say, okay, we've got to set a schedule for the meetings. How does this work best? And so you've got your individual check-ins with everyone, and then you've got a team, I call it a rhythm of business, but a team approach. And if you have to compromise, you know why you're compromising, because you can say, well, I've got to do it at 2 o'clock on a Monday because John over here, that's the only time he can do, but on a Wednesday he compromises for me and we do it at a different time. And so because you can't please everybody all the time, but what you can do is make people understand that they're making a compromise for a reasonable situation for someone else. And as soon as you start doing that, a lot of these things get hidden and people kind of don't know the reasons why calls are at a certain time. As soon as you're a bit more open, people go, oh yeah, brilliant. Because we know that no one comes to work going, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to just annoy everyone and do a really bad job. Everyone comes to work every day hoping to do a great job and really help their team. What ends up happening is the latter, is the former. And as soon as you start saying, okay, how can we work best together? What works for you? What doesn't work for you? Okay, how can we make compromises? People kind of go, okay, I know why I'm here, I know what I'm doing, and I know who can help me. And you just have to be much more intentional and much more planned with your activities when you're working remotely. Because going back to your, the shorthand of being in person, it just hides a lot of dysfunction because you're in person, everyone's laughing. You've got to be really intentional and planned when you're doing things remotely and making sure that everyone understands where they're making compromises and where you're accommodating them.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And definitely your framework is somewhat similar to mine. So I always tell all my clients to do like a half-hour one-to-one with every single person that reports to them every week, right? So, and exactly for the same point, like basically the first part of that time is literally just for the staff member to talk about whatever they like, right? And exactly for that reason, it basically get you to know them better, but it's also, I mean, they can also ask you stuff, right? But it's really getting that sort of personal level into the game is just such a game changer, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, but I really like the way, I mean, a lot of time, I think for a lot of clients, stand-ups is often a little bit difficult, but definitely it totally makes sense to try and get as much sort of team collaboration in as you can, right? But many of the clients that I work with, you know, they've people working around the clock, and it can sometimes be very difficult for them to schedule a lot of time together. But yeah, that makes total sense. I like that.
And with the global, because I've done global work as well, is having maybe even just once a month. And again, people know that in different time zones, 1 month you're getting up early, 1 month you're staying up late, to accommodate that. And we actually did quite a nice little, not in person, but little written notes. So we do follow the sun, and at the end of the day, we'd write a little note. And they got really friendly. And actually you enjoyed receiving them in the morning, and in the evening they'd be like, you know, and so you can actually do it without getting on a call. But it takes that effort for people to start getting comfortable writing some of this stuff down. But there are different approaches that can work when you're dealing with follow the sun or people at the other side of the world. But again, have the whole team talk about it and come up with a suggestion. And teams are great at coming up with ways and approaches that they enjoy to keep that team collaboration going. So yeah.
Totally agree. And I've also had a few clients recently that I mean, a lot of my clients like doing physical retreats, so they bring everyone together like once or twice a year or so. But now with COVID, a few of them have started doing it sort of, you know, take out half a day or a whole day sometimes to get different people presenting different things and so on, which have worked really well. And a lot of them is looking to actually do more of that even outside the COVID, just because it is an opportunity to get people to work together better and so on, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, and that's the thing, is when you can meet, it's really meet for social reasons rather than business reasons, and the team will just come together even more. So yeah, it's a shame right now, but yeah, see how that goes in the remote world.
Someday, some way.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's really excellent. And yeah, I think that's good. I think that's good, Ghilaine. In terms of sort of biggest challenges that your clients have, what are sort of often the sort of biggest things that your clients struggle with?
I think the main thing is a combination of sort of delegating, whether that's the responsibility of a business owner passing on. There's a lot of trust that going, I'm doing this, I need to pass it on to someone else because I'm too busy. And I think there's a lot of business owners that will kind of go, yeah, but they just know what they're doing. And actually the people don't all the time. They haven't been passed something on properly and said, right, this is what I need you to do, and this is the goal or the outcome I'm looking for. And with business owners can be very busy, you feel like delegation should be, I'm passing something on, so I should have more time. But there's a spike in busyness where there's two people doing the same work, and you have to give the time to passing something on. And so a lot of what I do with clients is looking at, there's one person doing the role now, which often is the business owner with some of this work, customer service, marketing, HR. And then them sort of saying, okay, I don't have time to do this anymore. I'm not giving it dedication. I either hire someone in or I pass it over to someone in my team. And being able to have that consistency of one or two people doing the same activity and that communication between two people. If you give it to one person, the control of it, everything kind of works really well. But what do you do when you're saying, well, there's one person doing it, I now need to share that out amongst more than one person, or I'm delegating a very important job that I'm doing as a business owner to someone, and customer service is often that role of just making sure everyone's happy. And a lot of the time what I do is I sort of split the personality of the person doing the role and why they do it so well, and what the actual activities are that they need to think about. Because again, going back to your point is of people being able to bring themselves to work. You can't, unless you can get cookie cutter people that are all the same to do the task, there are going to be differences and there's going to be different approaches. So there's a lot of time I'm sitting with the leader going, okay, it's not about how they're doing it, it's about what the outcome is. So you need to understand that this is what you're doing now and how you do it, and it works for you and you like it that way. But what you're aiming for is the outcome. So if we pass this to someone else, A, they need to understand what it is you want from it. B, they don't need to know how to do it in the minutiae. You need to kind of trust them that they'll do it their own way. But you also need to know how you're measuring them along the way, how you're training them up, and the time that you're spending with them to pass that on. And a lot of people just kind of go, oh, just go and do it. And they just assume that the knowledge that's in their head, other people, you know, that shared, like, well, doesn't everyone think that way? And it doesn't work. And so it's really kind of breaking that down. But in the end, it's not the checklist of how to do something. It's what's your outcome, because this person may do it differently. They may do it better. They may do it quicker because they're doing it in a new way. They're not doing it your way, and they may find shortcuts. And so a lot of the delegations, I worked with a leadership team recently, no one really knew what they were responsible for. You know, everyone kind of had a job title, and that job title was, you know, well, I'm responsible for sales and I'm responsible for operations. Like, but what does that actually mean for your organization and the people that are in it? And so I spent quite a bit of time going, okay, who is responsible for these particular things? How are you measuring them? And it sounds really onerous, but after 2 hours of a group call and 2 or 3 hours with each individual saying, what do you understand your role to be? You know, and half a day of writing the responsibilities, everyone's like, oh, brilliant, I know what I'm doing now. And you just see the shoulders go, oh, I know what I'm doing. I know what the leader expects of me, and therefore I can deliver. And the leader knows, I know what I'm measuring, so I know whether they're delivering it or not. And we have the check-ins, and the management meetings have some metrics to look at, and people have answers. And it is amazing how much we just, going back to the user manual, how much we just go, oh, well, I should know this. I assume this. I should know it all. It's like, well, why would you know it all? When have you had the conversation to get the answers? And I think that's the thing, is a lot of job descriptions don't describe the jobs. And there's a lot of assumptions. And again, going back to your point, is when you're remote, these dysfunctions become a lot bigger and a lot more obvious than in person, because you can have those small little conversations, those little tuck away conversations. But when you're getting on a call with someone, you don't want to intentionally go, actually, what is it you do? What is it you want? You feel like you're asking a stupid question. And so I think really is even just the leader going, okay, what am I responsible for here? And what are my team responsible for here? Having that documented in even just a small form and measured makes a massive difference to people's comfort levels, to know that they are delivering on something. They have their alignment to the rest of the organization.
Yeah, and it goes 100% back to one of the things you said earlier that I say all the time, which is no one shows up to work. I mean, no one wakes up in the morning and says, I want to go do a bad job today. Like,
Absolutely.
I've never met a human being that does that, right? But yeah, I 100% agree. I think delegation is probably also the biggest thing for my clients, and it's both the responsibility, I think, and I think it's also like one thing that's often a big thing, and particularly for entrepreneurs that build the business from the ground up, is that it's very hard for them to put themselves in the mind of someone who knows less than they do. They understand because they expect, because they know something, everyone must know it, right? And everyone must understand it the same way. But for me, one of the biggest things when you're working with people is always asking them questions to try and understand, how do they understand this situation? How do they understand? Like, if they're making a choice, it's not because they wanted to do a bad choice. Like, they're not purposely saying, oh, this is a stupid decision, let me take it, right? But it's always the other way around. They're doing things from their perspective that make sense. So if they're making what you would call bad choices, it's based on their understanding. So asking them questions to try and understand how they look at the world, how they look at the business, and so on, doing that regularly is super, super helpful to help both educate people more and help them understand more. And the worst thing is when people have misunderstandings. And that could be about the responsibilities, but it could also be, you know, like, how's the business making money? Like, sometimes I go into a business and, you know, they're, maybe if you talk with customer service, you know, they're like, oh, we should give this guy a refund because he's unhappy. And you're like, ooh, I'm pretty sure the management team wouldn't want that to happen. But it's so clear misalignment in terms of people understanding the business well enough to make the best possible choices, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's it. It's like having the decision-making sort of framework around, like, you can make decisions in this bucket, but if you go beyond that, you have to get approval, and almost having that, again, sort of that roles and responsibilities is, you're responsible for this, and within this box, you're welcome to make any decisions that are right, that you feel, certainly with customer service. But if you hit this marker, you have to go up, and it goes up a chain of decision making depending on how big it is. And a lot of people, even they, as you say, they don't have that framework to know what decisions they're allowed to make and what they're not. And it all comes down to alignment. I mean, the same thing is so much assumption. And actually, it sounds really sort of annoying to document things or write things down. But even just a statement, you know, above it, this is what we're aiming for, this is what we're doing, and having that regular communication with the teams to know, okay, this is what we're going for, and reiterate it so people fully aware. You can never repeat it enough, I think, about what this is about.
The other big benefit with that is specifically that often business owners forget, right? Like, often they give people tasks or responsibility and, you know, they forget about it. And the benefit with writing things down is the fact that, you know, it's in paper, and it makes it a lot harder to forget it if it's written down. So. Yeah.
Absolutely. Document everything, just in case you get run over by a bus, is my approach.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, when it's a super small company, right? If you have a couple of employees, it's maybe more difficult to do, but definitely as you grow, right? Like, you definitely want to document as much as possible. Both because, I mean, sometimes people leave a business, and they always, the universal law says they always leave at the worst possible time. So you have to be prepared for that as a business owner, right? And the more documentation, the better documentation you have, the better off you are. And one of my key things is I always try and, you know, in a lot of businesses, the business owner is trying to draft the processes and trying to tell people what to do. But I'm always keen on making sure that it's the person doing the job who's building the process, because they're the only ones that know it. They're the only ones that have the time to keep it up to date. Because the business owner trying to keep 500 processes in the business up to date, yeah, good luck, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's exactly it. It's if you come in and go, right, do it this way, they're like, who the hell are you? I'm the expert here. One of the things I quite like with documentation as well is using it as an onboarding and training tool, because I think with small businesses, you do have a risk. You have few people who know, and if someone leaves, that's like 30 or 40% of your knowledge gone out the door. So it can be quite expensive. And so having someone document it and then go, right, you're new, watch me, here's a document, read this through, watch me, and then correct it where I've changed something. And it's a really nice way for people to kind of go, hang on, you in the document you've done this. Oh yeah, we changed it, right. And so the new person has to rewrite the documentation based on what they see. And they ask questions, why are you doing it this way? And I think it's just, and that knowledge management passes on, and you've got a documentation and an onboarding document pretty much done, written by the experts who are doing the job. And so it doesn't, again, have to be too onerous. It's the first writing of it that's that's the big effort. But once you've got something, it evolves. And I think knowledge management is one of those challenges that I don't think anyone's really answered very well, even now.
Definitely. And there's a lot of tools out there, right? I mean, we tend to default to using Google Drive and things like that, just because it's so easy for everyone to access. It's simple and straightforward, right? But I mean, there is a ton of tools, like a ton of process tools and so on. But the key thing, just like with project management tools, I always say the same thing. It's not about having it. It's about keeping it up to date. like, it's great you have a project management tool, but if no one puts in or 20% of your team uses it, it's absolutely useless, right? And processes are the same. So one of my key things is I always make sure that the processes get checked every 3 months. So basically, there's one person who has the responsibility in the company to make sure all the processes have been at least ticked off as having been updated. And basically, that person generally goes around to everyone that's responsible for a process and say, have you updated this quarter? And usually there's a lot of last updated date and stuff. So basically that way, you always try and remind people and make sure that it doesn't go years out of date.
Absolutely. And I think, as you say, it's like processes and tools are only as good as the people that use them. And if they're onerous and horrible, people won't use them. So there's no point. Yep. And and that's why, going back to your point of people who write the process are the people that use it, because they know what they're doing every single day. If you put a process on top of them, they'll be like, I'm not, they'll still bypass it. They'll have it written up nicely and go, yeah, we follow that. And you're like, but you're not following that process. So it becomes redundant very quickly.
Yeah. And I think the last thing on the process that I've found is very important is that one person own a process. Don't give it to a team, because if more than one person is responsible, no one's responsible. So always pick one person. And if you have, like, for example, if you have a bigger customer service team, like, you can take you could take one process, give to one person, take a different process, give to another person. That's okay. And again, that helps collaboration, right? Because people it's not just like they can go away and change it without telling the team. Like, they have to make sure with the team that everything's okay and the stuff that it works and so on. And normally they still need a sign off from their manager when they're making changes, right? But that's definitely the best way to sort of keep things up to date and make sure it's continuously updatable. So
absolutely, totally.
Excellent. Well, Ghilaine, there's been an amazing chat so far. Thank you very much for joining in. Just before we finish, any sort of last resources or something that you would love to share with people? Anything that have been particularly valuable to your management development and the likes?
So I think I definitely use a manual. As I say, you can go and find lots of examples, and I have an example on my LinkedIn page. So use and abuse it if people are interested. I suppose for me, one of the best books I've read recently is The 9 Lies of Work by Marcus Buckingham. And really the importance of a team and the team leader in any area of business. A lot of teams go back to people will do things for the people they like, which generally is the team. So people who like each other and work together, they become kind of friends of some form. And so most of the effort that you put in will be because you care about your team members. So that's the one I think I would recommend. And then the last one, which I really love, is a book called The End of Average by Todd Rose. And it really looks at how the world kind of tries to put everyone in a box. And actually, you will do better by being yourself and playing to your strengths, similar to what you said at the beginning. And I think it gave me a bit of comfort that you can actually get on in the world without having all the stars and badges that a lot of people who are, like Elon Musk, who are raised up as success models, but actually in the real world, it's the people on the ground doing the normal, boring things, but being themselves that make a big difference. So those are things that have certainly helped me in the recent time.
Awesome. Yeah, I would say Marcus Buckingham is probably my favorite author. He wrote a book called First Break All the Rules, which is probably my favorite book around management. And there was a couple of great resources. It's not ones I've heard a lot about before, so thank you very much for that. If people are desperate to get hold of you, Ghilaine, and sort of hear more about your company or yourself, what's the best way for them to do so?
So website is www.brilliantandhuman.com. I'm on LinkedIn. Spell my name correctly. I'm the only one on the internet with that name.
I'll make sure we link to that.
It's not that hard to find me. Those two places. I'm not on any other social media, so they're the best places to find me.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure to talk to you. And for all of the audience, we'll see you all next week.
Thank you for listening to the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Please leave a review. It means the world to us. You can also learn more about management at madsingers.com.